So good morning, everybody. Jens Henning with Gamma here. You'll see two Gamma names up there on the screen, me and my boss. Unfortunately, my boss had a family emergency. His kid got very sick, so we're actually changing up this morning's format. Instead of a panel and a briefing, Elizabeth and I are just going to go back and forth for a discussion. We're also hoping that the audience will jump in on some dialogues and Q&A on some of the topics here. My name is Jens Henning. As Charlie said, I've been with Gamma for 22 years now, working mostly ops, safety, security in that field, both here in the U.S. and over in Europe. And to my left, Elizabeth, over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, I've been with the AOPA for more than 25 years, and in that time I have been with Pilot and Flight Training magazines, our communications department, I've run our foundation, I've run our You Can Fly programs, and now I am Chief Operating Officer. So these are issues that are near and dear to our hearts, and I'm pretty sure some of you have some strong opinions, so we're hoping that we'll hear from you as well.
Very good. So 3 topics. The first is the reauthorization of the FAA. The second one, Mosaic, that you may have heard about, that has implication for flight training. And the last one is aviation gasoline and its future. So we'll have a few slides on each topic, go back and forth a little bit. Charlie told me there's a couple of running mics around the room, so please put up a hand. I can't see from here because there's a big spotlight in my face, but I'm sure somebody will manage that as well. So first of all, Elizabeth, you guys are really close to what's happening out there in the system, so I'll let you kick off with what we're seeing out there in the aviation environment.
Yeah, so this is a very, very good time to be part of general aviation. As always, we have our challenges. The flight training industry in particular is facing some challenges right now. But overall, it's a great time to be here. You know, general aviation ops are up and really have been up pretty consistently since the pandemic. In a strange way, that really opened the door for a lot of people to recognize just how valuable GA can be and what an incredible tool it can be to get you around when other things are not working as you expect them to. So we saw a big boost in our industry then, and we're seeing a lot of people stick with it. Of course, there's also been the airline hiring issues, and as a result, we've seen a lot of young people looking for careers in aviation coming into the industry, so that should be good for all of you in the training side of the house. At AOPA, I think many of you know, we have a 4-year high school aviation STEM curriculum, so we are really trying to introduce young people all over the country to aviation and to the opportunities that exist for them, so that we'll not only fill the pipeline right now, but as we all know, this is historically a very cyclical industry. We have our ups and downs, and they can be pretty dramatic. But if we keep that pipeline full of interested parties, of young people who are exploring aviation, then we have a great opportunity to even out some of those bumps a little bit. The number of pilots is up overall, and of course student pilots are up. And flight instructors are up. Many of them are on the pathway to the airlines or to some other aviation career and may or may not be sticking around in flight instruction, which I hear from a lot of you comes with its own issues, but they're there, so that's a win. And of course, safety is up. You know, 2022 was the safest year in GA ever, and 2023 was very close second. So we always want to get to 0 accidents. That's where we would love to be. We're not quite there yet, but over the past few decades, our safety has actually increased by 90% when you look at fatal accidents. So you're doing all the right things, and we appreciate it. Jens?
From the manufacturer side, again, things are really good. 2 weeks ago, Gamma doesn't do a lot of work in the statistical feed, but we do put out kind of an accounting of the number of aircraft delivered around the world. Last year, 4,000 GA aircraft. It's the highest number we've seen in close to 2 decades. That covers everything from light trainers, light sport aircraft, business jets, turboprops, helicopters. If you look at the piston aircraft specifically, when we talk to our members, they are almost exclusively going to flight training organizations. I worked in flight training back in the 90s. Very few schools could afford buying a new aircraft, but these days, if you're seeing a Piper Cirrus Diamond or a Cessna going off a production line, it's with high degree of certainty going to somebody putting into good use for flight training. So there's also money going into the industry. Whoops. All right, now for the politics. So I'm in Washington, D.C. Gamma's headquarters there. Elizabeth, are you up in the Frederick facility?
I'm in the Frederick office, so we're about an hour north of D.C., although we do have a fully staffed D.C. office as well.
So arm's distance to D.C., at least a degree of deniability. But for those of you following the FAA, our regulator, every few years, Congress takes a look under the hood of the agency, and last year was one of those years. We have had a 5-year reauthorization between 2018 and 2023. They're now working on a few extensions to update the direction provided to Congress. Obviously, a lot of things have changed since 2018. So over the next bit of time, we're going to cover, first of all, the high-level stuff. I'll let you kick this off and just some of the priorities for AOPA and GAMA. So, Elizabeth.
Yeah, so, 5 years in, a lot has changed, and there's a big need for us to keep FAA funding stable so that that agency can make plans that helps us make plans. We're in a little bit of a holding pattern, as so often happens right now. We've got an extension to May 10, but we are seeing forward movement, and that's really exciting. This is the first time ever that we've had a GA title inside the FAA reauthorization bill, and there's a lot in there. In fact, there are hundreds of provisions in there, so I dare you to read it if you have the stamina. Looks like we got a question. Where can you read it? I think it's on our website. Yep. Go to aopa.org. and look it up. So again, hundreds of provisions, some that are especially important to you. We want to stop the CFI certificate from expiring. That's been a source of worry and concern. No other pilot certificate expires. Obviously, you have to maintain currency and you have to be proficient and you have to do all those things, but having to renew that every few years is a huge source of anxiety and probably not one we really need. We're looking at funding for airports, for GA airports, for things like ramps, for hangars. More than 70% of the GA airports around this country have waiting lists for hangars, and as flight schools, you may have your own facilities, but you may not have enough space, and you may not have the opportunity to hangar all your aircraft. Certainly individual owners are struggling with that as well. And when I say waiting lists, I don't mean a month or two. I mean years and years and years in many cases. So AIP funds have never been available for that. We're asking for money specifically to be made available for that, for ramp space, for all the things that we need to be successful at a GA airport. We're also wanting to expand Basic Med for pilots. That's been a huge success. Has anyone here flown on Basic Med? I know many of you are instructors. Yeah, a few of you. Yep, I fly on Basic Med as well. We've got more than 70,000 people using Basic Med, and one of the requirements of that original legislation was that the FAA go back and after 5 years examine the safety of that program, and it's identical to those with a third-class med or even higher. So we're pleased to say that it's a safe program, and if we can expand that to more people, lower some of those hurdles. Any medical is a snapshot in time, as we know, and any medical requires you as a pilot to make your own decisions about your safety. So, we'd like to see more people have the opportunity to do this. It's a much easier, much quicker process. We want to see a safe transition to unleaded fuel. We're going to get much more into the weeds on that, but I'm sure you guys have seen some of the alarming news. We've had legislation in California stopping the sale of leaded fuel, and we've actually had a couple of accidents as a result where people pushed it too far, they couldn't get the fuel they needed, they took off and they didn't make it. So it's really a safety issue. And we've also seen, too, that a lot of the fears are unfounded. We all agree we want to get rid of lead and we want to do it fast, at least as fast as we're able, but we have to do it safely. There was just recently a situation in Colorado. A lot of fuss was made about leaded fuel at airports. Local communities did some big studies, and in fact, they found no problems with lead in the environment. It got very quiet. After that. That was not really publicized, but unfortunately they're still trying to go ahead and stop unleaded fuel, or leaded fuel rather, from being sold. So we just need a rational, safe transition, and we need the support of the FAA to make sure that airports aren't going rogue on this stuff.
Thank you. If you look up on the slide, Elizabeth covered the left side, and several of those priorities very much align with what I hear from our manufacturers. On the right, you also see some of the things that we're pushing specifically. Regulatory reforms. Why do we want regulatory reform? Well, one of the things we actually want to see is the FAA being better at producing rules. Does that mean more rules? People don't always like that. No, but we want them to be more interactive, and we want them to be more timely in pushing out things. 2 examples on that. Several people here in the room helped develop the Airman Certification Standards, new framework in lieu of the PTS. If you have been following the FAA's updates since 2017, there hasn't been a new ACS issued. Plenty of technical work being done. Many here in the room traveled to DC to write the new ACS, take feedback from the community. What are we seeing out there? How do we refine it? How do we refine the handbooks? All that work was done. We're talking about thousands of pages, tens of thousands of man and woman hours. But since 2017, due to a rulemaking process that has been ground to a halt, we haven't been able to put out a single one of those. So we're asking the FAA to just look what broke in the process, because it is so important to address safety issues. Not to produce more rules, but when we want to reform them, we want to change them, when there truly is a new safety issue, the agency, again, just doesn't have the ability to push it out there. So that's a big push for us. As manufacturers, we sell a lot of aircraft in the United States. Last year was about 70% of the aircraft went to U.S. customers, airplanes, about half the helicopters. But if we produce an aircraft here in the U.S., the ability to sell it overseas, the FAA actually plays a very big role as kind of the interface with foreign authorities. That hasn't necessarily been a priority, so we're making a big push on that. Industry struggling with workforce. Yesterday, both in side meetings and during the panels, we talked about the shortage of people. That's a national issue. Aviation has a very unique set of issues because of the highly regulated environment. And our regulator has a similar challenge. When industry is hiring at the rate that we are, there are a number of civil servants are exiting the agency. And for some of these decisions that we need, updates to certificates, training courses approved, 141 certificates issued, the bottleneck becomes a shortage of staff at the FAA. So we're hoping for the FAA to look at that. In the end, many of these things come down to dollars and cents. If you can make X as a civil servant and X times something else in the private sector, it's a pretty hard decision to stay as a civil servant. So what can we do to look at that? Innovation right now, I don't know if we're getting into electrical aviation and other things here. There's a ton of innovation. Flight deck, propulsion systems, new fuels, many other things like that. The FAA is struggling to keep abreast of that. Running at the speed of industry is a very tough challenge for a bureaucracy, but we want to provide certain pathways, and there's direction for the FAA to get certain things done by certain dates to enable electric flight, vertical flight, many things in GA. And then last but not least, sustainability. It's a conversation more broadly, very much driven by our larger members. There are threats to restrict aviation. Our airline colleagues, business aviation, all the way down, not only locally, like we see in the avgas issue in several states here, but over in Europe and elsewhere, unless we really advance the sustainability dialogue. So those are 5 specific areas that we're advancing.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing is that while GAMA is actively pursuing some of those more vigorously, and AOPA is actively pursuing some of those more vigorously, our interests here really align beautifully, and not just these 2 organizations, but really across the industry. And that is very helpful for working with members of Congress and others when they help spur our regulator on. So we appreciate the support that's coming from all sectors of the industry on getting some of these things done.
Absolutely. I'm staring at Jim Viola, the new head of, the longtime head of the new organization named BAI, who will be up on the stage here later, I believe. So Jim's team is fantastic, working the helicopter issues, the modernization issues, AOP and others. It's good collaboration because there's a lot of live issues in DC right now. Yes, sir.
Jens, thank you very much. So in that previous slide that was up, there could be a third column there, which would be FAA reauthorization priorities for the flight training industry. One of the reasons the flight training industry has begun over the last 2 years a focused full-time advocacy effort was to represent specifically those things that are targeted to the flight training business world. While many of those are tangentially related and well placed, and yay, we're glad for that, I think the audience would be well informed to know that there are still 5 main priorities in the bill. One is probably a little tenuous in conference, but the other 4, I think, solidly will make it to the end. An Office of Central DPE Management in Washington, D.C., a call for a regulatory reform on Part 61, 141, workforce development grants and aids, including increased amounts of students that they can borrow for government-funded and guaranteed loans within their flight training. All of those would be very, very importantly placed for folks who are interested in looking at that. I heard someone ask a question earlier about where can I read that? House.gov, Senate.gov, type into the search window FAA Reauthorization 2023. The full text of the bill will come up in PDF form. It's about 1,100 pages right now. Go to the table of contents, look for the general aviation section. Again, to your points, and thank you for your organizations and all the leadership you've provided. This would be my 6th reauth that I've been a part of, and never before have I seen a GA section like this one. GA is the big winner in this bill when it finally is signed. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, now we're going to jump into the topic of Mosaic. So new aircraft, if you were at AirVenture last summer, the FAA timed its announcement of this, I think a week before, Monday of, something like that, to get a little really positive press and start a dialogue with stakeholders about this. Mosaic, we'll get into what it entails. There's really 3 areas, but it's a project long in the works, about 10 years of informal dialogue with the FAA. At times it covered UAS, it covered many different things, but the core part, and I think it's fair to say it's very much pushed by AOPA, EA, and other stakeholders group, is looking at the very lightest end of GA, lessons learned from basic med, light sport aircraft, and rules from 05 and so forth. So I think this is one of my slides. I'm going to start with it. Perfect. Yep. So it's again, the gentleman in the back mentioned the 1,100-page bill. Good news, that one is double-spaced. Mosaic is also a pretty heavy read, 193 pages when it was published. But it really covers 3 areas. After it was released last summer, comments due a few months ago. The first one is on sport private privileges. You know, many here in the room, I'm sure, hold pilot certificates other than that, but you're exercising sport pilot privileges. And after 19 years of building on sport pilot, what have we learned? The FAA embedded a lot of parts in this area. One is, increase the size of the aircraft that can be flown when you're exercising those privileges or hold a certificate. Those are the first 2 ones. There's a slight tweak to the seat configuration. So look at the subtlety here. You can fly a 4-seat airplane, and the FAA has defined what seats are defined as, with 2 people on board, so the pilot and a passenger. But that's a real big change in what you can fly. They're introducing something that I think was a bit of a curveball for us that have been in dialogue with the FAA, which was introducing rotorcraft with certain cockpit capabilities as something a sport pilot could fly, some pretty advanced avionics. Nobody really knows exactly what is required, but at least the FAA has put a marker out there that says if you can do what we say in these half a dozen words or so, a sport pilot has a pathway to a certain kind of rotorcraft. And then night operations. Middle column, experimental operations limitations. What we were hearing from a lot of the manufacturers, this caught a lot of attention. We do a lot of experimental flight tests. The impetus for this, though, is experimental operating limitations are issues by FSDOs. I know we have at least one FAA person in the room, and he's a good friend, so I can make this joke without getting myself in trouble. Sometimes different FSDOs look at things differently. And after, somebody's laughing, thank you. After a couple of tragic accidents, the FAA went out and looked at the certificates that have been issued and determined there was a wide degree of variability. So they cleaned up the order, but you see some content in here that also cleans up the rules that govern this. Some sensitive topics, 91.319 and flight operations over populated areas. A great rule to have long dialogues and debates about with your fellow flyers if you're ever flying in this space to make sure that you're not going to get yourself in trouble with the aircraft. Setting aside then the sport pilot privilege, you also have an entire dialogue about what is an LSA aircraft. A brand new Part 22. If you're from Europe, this is not a glider rule. Part 22 in Europe is gliders. No, this is an LSA home for certification. So 23 is small airplanes, 25 large, 27 helicopters, small and large, up to 29. So new Part 14 CFR in here. A lot of things. Self-declaration is maintained. Increase to the VS1, 50 to 54 knots. Increase to 4 seats. Again, you can make the aircraft up to 4 seats, but the sport pilot can only fly with 2, but any pilot can fly in LSA. So get your minds around that little gymnastic. It took me a while. And then some limitation changes. And maybe the thing that stirred up a lot of people, Gamma was very concerned about this. It adds Part 36 noise requirements. A Part 36 test is extremely costly and difficult. So here the FAA is doing a bunch of positive reforms when it comes to enabling new aircraft and introduces a test requirements that is in the tens of millions of dollars. So that caught a lot of attention. So there's clearly a focus on this. A lot of people don't like aviation. There's interest in addressing noise. But this is one that we spend quite a bit of time having a discussion about.
Yeah, and there's some things here that we think don't go far enough. So 54 knots for stall speed is nice, but not really nice enough. We're asking for 61 knots. That really expands the envelope of aircraft that can be flown here. We think it's a huge improvement to be able to use a 4-seat aircraft, but why not let people fly it with 3 passengers? When you start looking at the risk, which most of us do risk-based decision-making all the time, turning that up to allowing people to have 3 passengers is not an immensely larger risk, and it makes a whole lot of sense. If you're competent to fly 2 people, you're probably competent to fly 4. So we would love to see a lot of these reforms, but we think quite a few of them don't go far enough. And it has been 19 years since the last time we looked at this. Who knows how long it will be before we get a chance to look at it again. So we kind of feel like we really need to make the effort to push the boundaries on this a little bit. Comments closed in January 23rd, I think. That was an extension of the comment period. So we're hoping that this can keep moving fast, but we are asking for quite a few changes, and we're not the only ones. Putting in those comments was a really, really important opportunity for our community to make sure that the ultimate rule makes sense. For example, those testing requirements, how much sense do those make? We are talking still about very small airplanes. So.
And on the 54-knot issue, just pictures 1,000 words where we at. Gamma agreed 54 wasn't enough. So here's a quick analysis. Here's the footprint of the 04 rule. Sport pilot, light sport aircraft 1, and some example aircraft there. The one that really pushed the envelope permissible there was the Skycatcher, which is also worth a dialogue all unto itself. I know several flight training institutions were pursuing that one. And in the end, Cessna and others looked at it. It just wasn't the right aircraft. In some cases, it was because of some of the limitations in the LSA rule. It was originally written as a recreational rule, and pushing it over into training it was tough, right? So it was a limitation I think the FAA recognized. Here's the FAA's proposal. Again, don't worry about the weight. This is an imperfect rule. We're transitioning from a hard line over to a speed, so it's a little bit fuzzier on how you approach it. Not all aircraft publish this. But some example aircraft, I think we have them online. If you, like me, cannot see even the monitor down there and call them out, but Textron or Cessna in orange is up there on the top right, Piper in red with some of the standard models and so forth. We pushed up to this level. That picked up a few more models, baseline Pipers, and I need new glasses. A few others that basically are the common aircraft we see in general aviation being flown. Hey, if you're a sport pilot exercising these privileges and you want to fly a certified aircraft today, these additional knots for this proven set of fleet, let's enable it, FAA. So we pushed it up to 58, so a slight difference there. There's also a few aircraft right above that you see up there on the right, and I think these might be the ones that AOPA is pursuing. You see the SR-20, the 22, and a few other older Pipers up there as well. So kind of a quick overview there. Earlier overview, again, sport pilot versus LSA. The horizontal bars are kind of what we've done in the past. Experimental on the left. LSA, your old rule, over there in the light blue. Primary category, one of the first looks at reforming the certification rules back in the 90s. Part 23, If you look back to 2015, we did Part 23, level 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then you get into transport and other things like that, right? Above the graph, you see the bracket there. These are the aircraft that the FAA proposes that you can fly. So all the way up to low-end Part 23, which is great. Some of the subtleties there are worth a debate. For example, the challenge with LSA has always been you can't export an aircraft. So if you're signing up to make an LSA, it's a U.S.-only aircraft right now because it's a very unique thing for U.S. U.S. is the dominant market, but you see statements by companies like Icon. They went down the primary pathway just a few months ago simply to be able to export that aircraft to customer elsewhere. So the three fuels you see up there, GAMI fuel down the road, up the road here in Oklahoma is the success that happened with this STC is that we have now shown that the FAA has granted an approval to one fuel that's unleaded. Their challenge is how do you commercialize it? Nobody's ever done an STC before. It's intellectual property, and they're working their way through a ton of challenges. Everybody else has many other challenges just like they do, but they are on short final to start producing this and making it available, which is exciting. Swift Fuels has been around. It's an Indiana company. They have won the R100UL. They've gone through a different process, not the STC process, but what's called ASTM. Any fuel you've ever pumped either into your car or into an airplane goes through the ASTM process. So Swift Fuel is using that one. It's a very transparent process. It tells everybody involved what goes in it, what chemicals. We can address safety. We can address material compatibility, many other things. Swift is working on this, and we expect them, unless, again, if they find something, to have the ASTM standard issued here later this year in 2024. Then you have VP Racing, Lyondell Basel, who are working on what's called this POPI process that's been out there for a while. It's an FAA process that's looking at, let's just call it simply everything. Yep. We want to make sure that the big radials, some of them that we have here in the room, works on this fuel. Any aircraft that's out there, it's safe, and in the end, the FAA can issue an approval. It would actually be an agency approval as opposed to an STC holder or anything like that, that says this is good to go for the entire fleet. So here's some of the test slides. This is just the example on the UL100E. This is the Lyondell racing fuel. They have spent a lot of money and work, collaboration with the manufacturers. Here's some of the test detonation, some of the engines that they're testing, durability, performance. You guys are looking here, if you can see, these are some big engines. These are some vintage engines. We want to make sure that every aircraft up at AirVenture is able to burn this fuel successfully and safely. They're testing it a bunch around, I think it's 8 different aircraft models there. The manufacturers were asked for some of the more challenging ones. Again, we always go to the extreme when we test something. Same approach here. Some specific testing, cold weather, certain altitudes and so forth. Want to make sure it works, no safety issues. And then on the right, this has been the harder, and some of the non-starts in the past decade or so over the PAPI program, material compatibility. We're taking the lead out, we're putting in a very advanced chemical. Does it melt your fuel tank? We've seen sealants melt. We've seen composite wings having problems, right? If we say lead is gone and here's a new fuel, and we start pumping it, we do not want an aircraft owner to have something bad happen to their aircraft, either for safety, or in this case, something melts and the aircraft becomes grounded, basically. So some big items there. The full-scale testing is underway, 50,000 gallons of UL100E. You probably recognize the locations of these manufacturers. FAA's got 20,000 gallons, everything else, Lycoming, Continental, Textron, Diamond, Cirrus, and so forth. Here's just a status, the different pathways you saw the earlier slide. In the end, we're hoping that by third quarter FY25, so that's summer next year, the FAA is in a position to issue this. So again, success. GAMI exists, Swift, near final this year, and the big process next year. So next 18 months, you're going to see a lot of activity in this space. So the big goal is everybody keeps flying safely, and there are no negative impacts on the aircraft, and we can do it economically as well.
I don't know if anybody's been following, but we have a donated Baron, and we are running the GAMI fuel in one engine, and we're running 100 low lead in the other, and it's been fantastic. We've got more than 150 hours on it. We've flown it all across the country, and we're not seeing any signs of wear. We're having it taken apart and looked at regularly, performing very well. In fact, we get slightly higher performance out of the GAMI side than we do out of the traditional 100 low lead side. So it's only a start, but it's going to be important that we as an industry and a community help first understand what these fuels really can and will do and the realities of an aircraft, not just on a test stand, but also that we help our community build confidence in these fuels so that people are okay with running them in their aircraft and keeping them flying.
Yep. That's really the important thing about what AOPA is doing, showing that it can be done. The prior engineering tests, these are the extreme things that we're testing, right? The high altitude, the speeds, materials, and all those kind of things. Here we have an existing fuel. It has the approval. The pictures here on the right, I mean, as I understand, the reason that the picture on the right is better than the picture on the left, on the right, is we took out the lead, and hey, the engine is cleaner and a bunch of other things. You don't have the buildup because that nasty substance lead is out of it, right? So it's a real positive thing here. Nothing negative is happening. So hopefully we'll get there with 2-3 more fuels. And before I get the hook, Charlie, I think we have one more question, and then we'll exit the stage.
I believe it was UND that started using the UL-94 on their fleet. I think they put like 28,000 hours on it, and then they pulled out of it. Is there any details on why they were eliminating that, or?
I only have seen what was basically briefed by a colleague. I think they got some experience that they want to investigate. Further into that, I don't have all the details, but I can put you in touch with somebody who can. It was tied to
Valve recession.
A valve recession, thank you. That they're just digging into to see, hey, like with anything new, is there an issue? We really, really want to know. Prior fuels, there's been dozens prior to the 3 we highlight here. We have found stuff, right? We have hundreds of pages of reports, thousands of pages of reports that address those things. This is the type of thing that says, hey, something is different. Let's take a peek before we say, let's go out and do this more widely. All right, Charlie, I think we're mostly back on time, and hopefully that covered what you guys were interested in. Elizabeth, thanks for joining me up here. Hope the format worked, and appreciate the next part.
Thanks, everybody.